Hello.
Hey, sorry.
How do we make it focus?
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to get it to work, but now I'm up and running.
Okay.
No problem. All right, everybody, you've got Ryan Fitzgibbon,
I can't make it big.
AIGA founder here at Grand Valley. He's going to talk to us. Yeah, woo-hoo. That's right. All right. Well, thank you for taking time today.
Yeah.
We're just kind of hoping you could talk to us a little bit about how you started the chapter here, and kind of what happened after that.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. You were lost there for a minute, but as long as I can hear you guys, then it's all good. Let me think. So I think in like 2007, I went to a portfolio day in Chicago, and I was there with like Ryan Greaves and Dave Schofield and Jay Kukowski. If you guys know any of their names, they graduated a year before me, so they're all alums as well. But we all went down, and it was kind of the four of us actually that decided that it was time that Grand Valley had an AIGA chapter, because we've gone to different events in Detroit and all sorts of like traveling for events, and we were just like fed up with it, so we were like, let's bring this to our home turf. So we kind of did it. We had a little bit of resistance in terms of like the chapter they've already like tried it in the past, or other student groups that just had failed, or it's hard to get people to participate, as you guys know. So different administrators were not necessarily behind it, but we were going to do it anyway. So it also helps that a lot of us worked in UPO, as you probably all do, or have a chance to if you can. But it helps to be really close to student life and kind of get through the whole process of starting a student org, which is just a lot of like paperwork and all that crap. But yeah, we did it basically just to start having events of our own more locally and get a little bit more exposure for our program, because even now being in California and being super involved with AIGA at the national level, people have heard of our program, or they've heard of people who have come out of it, and it felt like we needed more recognition at Grand Valley for the art and design program. So yeah, we did it, and just started by like showing Helvetica and showing a couple of putting together like really quick events that had big names to them, so that people would kind of pay attention to us.
Great. So then you were involved in a couple other things while you were here. I guess it was afterwards. It was the Command X? That was after you graduated?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not too far after I graduated, though. So I graduated in 2009 and moved to, I guess in April or May or something like that, and moved to San Francisco to do an internship at IDEO that summer. And then that summer was the summer that the Command X reality show at the national conference was doing its second annual event. And so I applied to it just thinking like, what the hell, I think I applied to it like the day that it was due, the deadline, because I was procrastinating, of course. And I just kind of threw something together, and like a couple weeks later I heard that I got in. So in October I went to Memphis and competed in that, and I feel like that kind of helped me just kind of really immerse myself into AIGA a lot more by having new connections and having people know who I was coming back to San Francisco and wanting me to get involved on the chapter in San Francisco. So it's a pretty good experience for me.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned IDEO. I think you were an intern at IDO?
Yeah, so I guess back up. And before I was an intern at IDO, I was interning at People Design in Grand Rapids, and sorry, I'm like force quitting everything to see if this will, because you guys are all frozen. So I was an intern at People Design for maybe 9 months or something like that, just like the summer before senior year, and then kind of part-time trying to make that work during school, which I know is really hard because I did it and I was also still working at the art gallery and had a million other things going on. So that kind of helped me at least gain confidence working in a studio environment or around other designers that were, you know, legit. So when I got to IDO, I felt pretty comfortable, even though the scale of it was so much greater. It was a pretty smooth transition. So yeah, I did about 3 months at IDO in Palo Alto, which was pretty intense. It was kind of just like being thrown into the deep end in terms of going into this place that was a highly strategic place that didn't necessarily involve sitting in front of Illustrator or InDesign all day long, or even sometimes at all in a week. So learning what it meant to actually go through the design process from research to final design refinement, or even sometimes stopping at strategy and passing off more strategic recommendations to clients that, you know, weren't always visual. I think that's a great thing about design firms like IDEO, is that they do really invest in making the outcome more clear by making it visual, and that's why they have so many creatives. But it was definitely a learning curve getting comfortable with a whole new style and definition of design. And then after that, the reason I actually moved to San Francisco was to go to grad school at the California College of the Arts. So I finished my internship, went over, started grad school, and it was a really great experience. Like, I was, you know, surrounded again by like really creative and like energetic people, because you're paying a shitload of money to be in grad school, so you like, you know, are gonna work pretty hard just to be there. But it just wasn't right for me. I think the timing just didn't pan out, because I felt like I got a teaser of what it was like out in the real world, and then I was being thrown back into school, and I was just like, I want more of that before, you know, I invest in something like this. So also that's when Commandex happened, and I came back and I was just like, peace, and I just dropped out. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I was probably, you know, going to freelance for a while. I had made some connections through AIGA, and then I got a call from IDEO, and they were like, hey, we need help. You want to come back? And it was just like, it felt right. Like, it was too easy and too, you know, such great timing that I was just like, you know what, this would be a really good experience to further that learning that I had in the internship. So I'm like so glad that I did it, because I've done a lot there and traveled a lot and learned a lot. So one thing I was thinking about in preparing to talk to you guys was this idea that I've kind of been basing a lot of my decisions on since, I guess, going to Grand Valley. But something that, I don't know, take it for what it's worth, but I was thinking about, when you're making decisions, think about whether you want to create something new or join something existing in the world. Either way, obviously, you're going to learn a lot from it. But I think it's just a good thing to think about when you're thinking, okay, so what am I what am I actually looking for in what I want to learn. So just to give you examples of like my path, like recapping, like when I started the AIGA Grand Valley student group, I was like, okay, we need to create this. It needs to be new, and it doesn't exist. So this is an opportunity to learn through building. So that's me creating. And then I moved to San Francisco, and that was me deciding that Grand Rapids is a really cool place. There's a lot of great design happening, and that was part of the early conversations and planning of creating AIGA West Michigan. So it was exciting to like be a part of all this growth and creating something new in West Michigan. But I was like, at this point in my life, I really wanted to join something established. So I went to San Francisco, and I was like in the center of the design capital. Then, you know, going to grad school, I was again feeling like creating my own voice, my own point of view. And so it's back to that, you know, you can see like me flip-flopping. I think that you obviously can go back and forth between these two modes, but just always thinking about like what stage of learning you're in. So then like, you know, continuing on, like dropping out of grad school and going back to IDEO, joining something again that's established. Like I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't ready to create that new thing. And then with AIGA San Francisco, I've been on board almost 2 years. I was brought on to kind of lead and grow the social media part of our communications, and because we really didn't have any, and I think we probably had like 1,500 followers on Twitter, and now we have over 4,000, which is pretty amazing. I mean, I think that's just natural growth, but it's really an opportunity for me to try out new things with a chapter to build that. And then lastly, where I'm at now, if any of you follow me or had your ear to the ground, I've quit IDEO, and so this is my first week being free and unemployed. But yeah, basically, I think the learning will come after. I don't know whether I'm looking to join something new or create something new. I think I'm looking to create something or, you know, be a part of my own venture, but each one of these has kind of shaped the way that I've made decisions, and I think there's the really easy ways to like fall into the trap of, you know, well, I have to think about what I'm going to be in 5 years, or I have to think about, you know, what I'm going to be doing at the end. But it's so much easier and like takes the stress out of it when you're just thinking about what this one little lever is going to do for you in the next few months. And I just thought that would be something to share.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I was thinking a lot of us here are looking for internships, or kind of at about that point. And people design is kind of a big deal. I mean, that's one of the more well-known places in Grand Rapids. Do you have any advice on, or any insights into what that process was like? How did you send stuff out? How did you get in touch with them?
Yeah, I mean, in my case specifically, I felt like what kind of got their attention was that I was starting this chapter of AIGA student group, not chapter, at Grand Valley. And so they were just interested because they were already focusing on AIGA West Michigan, and they saw kind of this potential or this ambition, I guess, rather, in me that wanting to create something. But in addition to that, like in kind of the three big applications that I've gotten accepted to, which would be People Design, I guess, CommandX, and IDEO, all the feedback that I've gotten in terms of how I've sold myself is through the way that I spoke about my work, or I wrote about my process and what I was really curious about. Especially because sometimes so much of like your best work is the work that you're working on right now, and it's in progress and you aren't prepared to show it. You know, like, I'm sure a lot of the seniors in the room are like stressing out about their thesis or whatever, or their senior show, and obviously that's not going to be done until after the point that you need the internship or need to be accepted into something. So you really have to kind of craft the way that you're talking about it and giving the visual cues and the little hints and at that. So thinking back at like applications, they've all kind of talked more about like the way that I work, the style that I work in, and focused less on kind of the outcome, if that makes sense.
How did you like develop that style? Like, did that come from Grand Valley, or is that something that you just like came up with on your own?
I think probably both. My capstone class was kind of really informative and transformative for me, just thinking about and being able to research outside of the world of graphic design and thinking about what it actually means to design. I mean, it's so much more than just what we see on the walls behind you and behind me, you know? So I was reading a lot about design thinking and what the process behind the greater capital D design is. And so I think I just kind of adapted a lot of what I was learning outside of the classroom. I think part of me starting AIGA as well at Grand Valley was to have experiences that didn't come from the professor's mouth, or that didn't come from a tutorial or something. Like, it was like more hands-on or real world. So I don't know, I think it just kind of like all, it was like potpourri of like crap, and I just learned this style, and I'm still learning like what my style is, and my process, really, not my style, because I think I don't really have a visual style, but more of a process.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the projects you worked at IDO? Because they'd be so different than, you know, any projects that we're doing at school here.
Yeah.
Just kind of that process, or how you were involved?
Yeah. It really runs the gamut. Like, I've done a lot of work in education, working with kind of the K through 12 system in the U.S. And in other countries as well. But companies will come to us with a challenge, like, how do we increase teacher effectiveness in K through 12 in all 50 states? And it's like, well, where do you start? You know, like, there's a lot. So the process in which IDEO does it is going out and actually talking to teachers. When we have these really vague briefs, we just go and we talk to the actual people that we want to design for or create for. And so in this case it was teachers, and so we went into schools in like Kentucky and New York and I think California or something like that, and just like sat with them in their classrooms after class, during class, like in the library while kids were like running around researching, and just talked about like not only what would make their lives easier, but how they could be better supported. And so there's all this like human factors research that we call this ethnographic style that I'm there for, which is really exciting and interesting. But as I was alluding to earlier, sometimes I'll go weeks without touching a computer or like, you know, getting an Illustrator and like making something. And sometimes part of that, those dialogues, is helpful when we have tools. So I'll be there to create cards or create worksheets or something that we can talk about when we're talking to teachers or whomever. And then we come back from the field, we kind of lay it all out, we say this is what we heard, and like put it all up on Post-its and start to group it and synthesize it and really make meaning out of it based on the challenge that we were given, and trying to fit it into concepts and fit it into ideas that we could then build. So it's very, very early stages before we actually decide or define what we're building. And then it kind of goes from there. It takes its own course in different ways. My actual role, you know, is all of that, but when it comes down to the end of the day, the end of the project, I'll be the one creating the, you know, the screen presentation that we deliver to the executive or whomever, or the book that I'll deliver to the client. But basically wrapping up all that, the strategy and the thinking behind where we've gotten to in the recommendation. And so it's really nice because I get to work this, like, you know, both sides of the brain and do multiple things, in that I'm building what I'm making, you know, and like I'm actually forming the thoughts behind the concept, and then sometimes building the concept out, or at least presenting those concepts in a really nice and clear way. And so that has kind of shaped the way that I think about design now. And part of the reason why I left IDEO is because I finally realized that I wanted to take something all the way through, take something to market, or maybe even start a little bit later, and work with people in a different way, and not necessarily do all the strategy, but focus a little bit more on the end goal and making it right for the consumer, and, you know, designing whatever that is. So I'm just moving towards the end of the line, I think, now, but it's good to have that experience to kind of know where it's coming from.
Okay, we're gonna open up to questions now.
Oh, please, I'm just rambling.
Oh, that's okay. You guys.
Shalom.
Well, I have a question. Did you like always know that you wanted to go into like kind of design strategy like right after college? Now it seems like you're like making your way back to graphic design, but coming out of like college, did you have an idea that you wanted to do art direction and kind of design strategy?
No.
No?
Yeah, not at all.
It just kind of like fell into place, or?
Kind of. I think like towards the very end of my senior year, I was realizing that a lot of the design that I was like lusting over or drooling over, like on Found or whatever, was like kind of, you know, flat, or just didn't have much meat behind it. And there's all these like, you know, posters for Haiti and like stuff that seem really like they have a good intent, but what could you create around that that's maybe more experiential, or something a little bit more deep that has more meaning? And so my thesis was kind of about, my senior show was like about how we can be more responsible as designers, and the other part of it was just like tearing apart infographics and saying like, because infographics were such a thing, like, and they still are, but like they're really blowing up in 2009, like with Good Magazine and Fast Company, and I was like, what the hell, these aren't even really making the information more clear. They're just some designer or someone that got in there and was like, I'm going to make something cool and put it on a spread. So I was just kind of pulling that apart and saying like, okay, well, as designers, we really need to think about what we're trying to say before we design it, or before we pick the typeface, or before we pick the color palette, which are all important things. But of course, I was starting to realize then that I needed to step back and think about it in a more holistic way. So I'm still, you know, not sure if that's exactly what I'm best at, or I love to do, and what I'm passionate about. But it's, like I said, it's really good to have that kind of understanding of both sides. I totally lost you guys. I can't see anyone, so you're gonna have to.
Let's try to walk over there.
Say who you are.
We got one more question.
All right.
Listen.
All right. I have a question about location. What are your thoughts on like how do you decide that you want to move to like a major design center or a major kind of like art mecca, I guess, or how do you decide? Do you see a company that's in San Francisco or New York, and do you say I want to go there for that company? Do you say I just want to go to this place and be involved in whatever there is? Like, what are your thoughts on different locations and like the importance of that, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question because I grew up in Michigan as well. Like I'm a Midwest boy, and I kind of always saw myself leaving. But then when I got to Grand Rapids, I was like, this place is pretty cool. Like there's a lot going on and whatnot. But I had an experience in the portfolio day in Chicago that was pretty enlightening. It was actually the grad school portfolio, so you would go and you would, sit out in front of grad schools from across the country and show them your portfolio. And every school was like, you should come to our program because, our faculty's the best, whatever. Like, they were just selling the school and the program. And then I went and I sat down in front of this woman from California College of the Arts in San Francisco, and she didn't say anything about the program. She was just like, man, San Francisco is so cool, like you're gonna love it if you come out here. Like, she just sold the kind of environment that came with, and the lifestyle that came with living in San Francisco. And I was just like, you know what, that's me. She kind of helped me see that even though I was looking mostly at schools in New York, at SVA, and all these other schools that were just way more reputable, like, this was a time for me to actually go and explore a city. So I chose San Francisco first because of that reason. There's still so many great things about other cities and whatever, but I think it's really important to think about where you want to be before thinking about, it goes hand in hand, but what there is and who there is there to offer it to you. So you can make whatever you want out of any experience. I always said that about school, like, it is what you make of it. When I was at Grand Valley, like, maybe not having the best times in classes, or like thinking a professor was shit, like, I was just like, well, I can do what I want and make it the best and start an AIGA group or do a project that doesn't necessarily fit the requirements, but it's going to build my portfolio in a way that I want it to be built. So yeah, so I guess that goes without saying, like, pick the place that is going to be right for you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any more questions? We don't want to keep you too long.
That's cool. I just got some drinking to do tonight. Yeah, it's my goodbye party at IDEO tonight, which is bittersweet.
Well, I think that about wraps it up. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad you guys invited me.
Is there anything else?
I'm the grandfather of AIGA Grand Valley. But I still look good, right?
Well, thanks. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good luck, everyone.
Bye.
Hold. Let's hold.
Oh. Hey! How do I do this? Hey! Yeah, do that. Yeah. Oh, and.